is talk 3 in our 5-part series. So if you haven't been here for talks 1 or 2, these have been recorded and have been shared, and so you can go back and listen to them. And just a reminder, maybe make sure everyone's on mute so we don't get any, your picture doesn't pop up in the recording, because normally just me will pop up. So make sure everyone's on mute first of all. So in the first talk, we really went into why nutrition is so important, especially with those with autoimmune conditions. And then in the last talk, we really dove into kind of what I call real food is, and the different types of macronutrients and what good sources and not so good sources are of those. And we went into a lot of detail, and just a big reminder for everyone that everyone is on their own unique journey with food. So please don't compare yourself to others and really think about how this can apply to you. So this week, we are really diving into slightly beyond like what to eat, but kind of how to incorporate that into your day. So how to build your plate, a bit about blood sugar. We'll talk more about hydration because we only touched on that briefly last time. And then about how to we'll touch on different types of diets, and then about how to make your kitchen and your cooking work for you so you're not spending your whole life cooking. So I won't spend too much time introducing myself because most of you know me, but just a very brief background is that I first changed my diet just over 10 years ago because of my autoimmune condition that ruled my life and took away many of my dreams in life when I was a young 20-year-old. And I changed my diet after seeing an osteopath who knew that you go to an osteopath and you change your diet, but taking gluten out of my diet and starting drinking chicken broth for breakfast, which we'll actually get into why those two are so important in our next talk on digestion, changed my life. So I then started delving into the world of changing my diet, and then I became really inspired and qualified as a nutritionist 5 years ago, which is why I'm here now. So just a disclaimer that this is just it's not generic, but it is a generic presentation. It doesn't consider everyone's individual circumstances. So please reach out to a practitioner or a doctor or about any specific medical conditions and anything that you're doing to change your diet. And also please respect bio-individuality. Even though many of us here have common autoimmune conditions, they're not all driven by the same thing, and we're not all in the same boat. So you have to really not compare yourself to others and take yourself on your own journey. So as I said, this is the third in a 5-part series, and next time I'll go into it at the end, we're going to be diving into digestion, the leaky gut, the microbiome, and the autoimmune connection, and then the final one's going to be really considering further environmental factors. So just to have a bit of a recap as to what we discussed last time. So we were really talking about what food is, and I think people are now starting to laugh because about what I call food. So I want everyone to be really focusing their overall diet on eating whole, real foods. And to me, that means real food that doesn't have an ingredient label. So it's the fruit, vegetables, meat, good quality fat, rather than the inflammatory food that tends to come out of a packet with 10,000 things on the back of it and other convenience items. We want to focus on nutrient density over calories. Unfortunately, over the last 50 years, we've had a massive shift in our focus from that which our ancestors would have had. And we now focus a lot more on calories rather than nutrient density. And if you look at, say, 100 calories from broccoli versus 100 calories from Kit Kats, for example, they're very different things. And so we want to really be focusing on getting foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals so we can provide the body with the resources required to build cells for immune regulation, for tissue healing, and much more. But I did want to just add one emphasis about calories. Calories are useful for a few things. We want to make sure that we are eating enough food, enough good quality food. I think there has been a bit of a trend that people cut their calories in order to lose weight, but actually in that situation, your body will not feel safe, and so it'll probably hold on to weight more than before. So you want to be able to eat enough calories to make sure your body has enough energy. And actually sometimes, but if weight is one of your things that you struggle with, adding calories in the form of real foods can actually make your body feel safe and then make your body lose weight. So please look at your daily intake and go, is this really enough for me to sustain my life, my lifestyle, and much more? And the other thing is bio-individuality, and I've mentioned this already. So we are all different. No single diet or food works for everyone. We have to learn to listen to our body. So this is just the summary list of what we discussed last time. So foods to enjoy. So we have our 3 different types of macronutrients, which are in food form, and the other one is water, which we'll touch upon. But we want to have carbohydrates in our diet. And these are not the ones that you typically classify as carbohydrates, which will come on the next slide, which are foods to avoid, which are white breads, pastas that are more refined carbohydrates. But carbohydrates come in forms like vegetables. So any vegetable will, and fruit, have carbohydrates in them. And the amount of carbohydrates depends on where they come from. So the amount of carbohydrates in the vegetables that grow below the ground and in fruits are higher than in vegetables that grow above the ground. So you want to focus on lots of non-starchy vegetables, ideally local and organic. They'll have the most nutrients, the least pesticides applied, and you'll obviously support your local farmers. And you want to focus on eating different colors, starting with green, because the different colors represent different nutrients in the vegetables. You then want to, when you enjoy fruit, have it in its whole form, because then you get the fiber in the fruit that slows down the impact on your blood sugar. And then properly prepared grains in smaller amounts, because things like grains are actually very packed in carbohydrates. So if you have too many, they shoot up your blood sugar, and we'll talk about blood sugar soon. Healthy fats we talked about last time. So these are your really not processed fats in the form of avocado, nuts and seeds, butter and ghee, extra virgin olive oil, unrefined coconut oil, animal fats, eggs, fish, and full fat products only. If you refer back to the handout from the last talk, there is a bit of a guide in there as to how to cook with different fats and what fats are suitable for, and oils are suitable for cooking at what temperatures. And then finally, we have our proteins, which include wild-caught fish, sardines and salmon, pasture-fed meat and eggs, soaked and sprouted nuts, seeds and legumes. And I'll give you a soaking guide when we do the talk next week on gut health as to how to soak things in more detail. Organic, non-GMO soybean, for example, tempeh. So we want to have soy that is ideally fermented. And it's really important to have organic, non-GMO soybeans, because soybeans can be very heavily sprayed with pesticides. Bone broths is a great source of protein and really good for healing your gut. Things like collagen powder are a great replacement for the more processed protein powders, and then things like cheese. You'll notice here that I have listed things like wild caught fish and pasture fed meat and eggs, or grass fed meat, for example. These are kind of the top quality things that we want to have, and obviously work within your price bracket to figure out what's the best quality of foods that you can afford for your individual circumstances. So this is now the ones we'd like to more avoid. And you can see, actually, even just looking at this slide, the different colors have kind of diminished compared to the slide before. So the carbohydrates you want to avoid or limit are the more refined sugar carbohydrates. So the candy, cakes, pastries, ones with refined carbohydrates, the white flours, the refined grains, the pasta, the rice biscuits, breakfast cereals, white rice. And you kind of, in a way, see in these, the color is not as vibrant as eating lots of vegetables. And what happens when you eat these is, because they're not in their whole form, they actually deplete us of other vitamins, particularly things like B vitamins, and you're not also getting the nutrients in with them that you get from other things, and then they spike your blood sugar. Avoiding artificial sports drinks. A great replacement for an artificial sports drink is something like coconut water. You can even add some lemon to that, a magnesium powder, and you can make your own really, really, really easily. So if anyone wants that, let me know. We want to avoid any fat products that is low fat. So anything that is low fat is going to be more processed than the normal product. And fat actually makes your food taste good. So when you make something low fat, you then add sugar most often. We then want to avoid the industrially processed seed oils, vegetable, canola, rapeseed oil, soybean oil, corn oil. Avoid them as much as you can in the home, hopefully all the time at home. When you go out, unfortunately, it's virtually impossible to avoid them unless you ask things which are not cooked in vegetable oil and they use olive oil instead. So you do have to sometimes surrender to some things at sometimes, and maybe based on where you are in your healing journey, you choose to eat out less rather than more sometimes. avoiding the margarine, which is the hydrogenated forms of fats, store-bought cakes and commercially fried foods, which contain the above. And then proteins to avoid is the more processed meats and mock meats. And there is a big myth around bacon. Bacon, if you go to your local butcher, and hopefully if they make it themselves, you can actually get nitrate-free bacon that they just literally use salt in the processing of it. What we want to be really avoiding is the processed meats that have the laundry list of ingredients on them and that are kind of the more reconstituted versions. We get the whole meats in their whole form that have been smoked are actually okay. Improperly prepared legumes, so legumes that haven't been soaked, because these contain this layer on the outside that can take minerals out of us and can impair our digestion. Non-organic soy products and processed protein powders, which I've talked about already. And again, always read the label. So that's kind of a recap from last time, and hopefully every time I repeat it, it's going to make even more sense. So what I want to do today as a starting point is talking about how to put these macronutrients into practice. So how do you enjoy these carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in your everyday life? So I'm starting off with a picture of a fire, and I'm going to talk about something called the fire analogy. So if you were out camping, which I love to do, and you're building a campfire, you would start with a mixture, most likely, of different types of woods or sticks. So you would start off, you would build your fire with the bigger logs at the bottom, your small sticks and logs on top, and then your kindling on top. You would then light the kindling, and this is because it's easy to light and the energy produced is high, but it doesn't last that long. This will then help the small sticks and logs to start lighting and then burning. These burn for a decent amount of time, but they don't require that long to catch. And then you have your bigger logs at the very bottom of the fire that take a while to light, but once lit, they take a very long time for the energy to be released. So what you can do is we can compare this to the macronutrients that we have. So all three macronutrients can be used for energy. It's not just carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are any food that break down into glucose, and glucose can be used for energy. But actually all three macronutrients can be used for energy. So our kindling is equivalent to our carbohydrates. So we start generating energy quickly, but it doesn't have a sustained effect. And obviously your refined carbohydrates like the breads, pasta, sugar, is going to burn off extremely quickly. If you have something like root vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, they're going to burn off progressively a lot more slower than the refined versions. But still, if you had a meal that was just based in carbohydrates, your energy wouldn't last that long. So then we have the small sticks and the logs, and this is like the proteins. So takes us about 30 minutes, depending on our digestion, for them to help produce energy in our body through a process called gluconeogenesis. And then these will give us energy for a few hours. And these are kind of one of the workhorses of energy. So you want to have protein in every meal alongside our carbohydrates to help act like those small logs. And then last, but by no means least at all, we have the bigger logs that are our fats. So these take much longer to digest or metabolize. And some people, if your digestion is not up to scratch, you find it really hard to digest, which is a quick trick for this is things like coconut oil can actually bypass your traditional fat digesting system. So they can actually be very useful for energy. So these take about an hour or 2 hours to give you energy, but then they'll give you sustained energy for a long period of time. To add to that, when you just burn carbohydrates as a form of metabolism, it's actually quite inflammatory. But if you learn to burn fats as fuel, it's a lot more anti-inflammatory. And obviously, inflammation plays a big part with anyone with an autoimmune condition. So trying to have an anti-inflammatory form of metabolism will really help the overall picture. So mostly in modern day society, and this is due to the diets that we have evolved eating, people are sugar burners, relying on carbohydrates for fuel. When you are a sugar burner, you can burn carbohydrates as fuel, but you will really struggle to burn fats. But if you make yourself into what I call a fat burner, you can burn both carbohydrates and fats. And you'll burn predominantly fats, but then you can burn carbohydrates on top of that. And you can change this through your diet, which hopefully is really inspiring. So do you get any of these? Hangry, fatigue, constant need to eat, inflammation, energy highs and lows, difficulty losing weight, wake up in the night, cravings for sugar and caffeine. These are all signs that you are likely on the blood sugar roller coaster. So this means that we probably haven't optimized our balance of macronutrients in every single meal. So if you look at the roller coaster line that goes high, low, high, low, so what will happen is we eat a meal. Our blood sugar will shoot up, and then what will happen is alarm bells go off in our body because our blood sugar is too high. And our body keeps the amount of sugar in our bloodstream under very close watch, a bit like a thermostat for your heating. So what then happens is our pancreas will pump out insulin, which will then send our blood sugar, make our blood sugar go reduce. But often our pancreas will overproduce insulin, and then our blood sugar will then plummet down. What happens then is you get to this slump where the red bit is, and you get your sugar cravings. You go and get a snack, you go and get that coffee. And then your energy will go up, and then the whole process will start over again. So you basically go through the day going, okay, I'll eat something. And then it lasts for 2 hours. You need to go and eat something else. And it lasts another 2 hours and you go and eat something else. And this is a relentless cycle. It's not ideal for our body because every time we have the sugar and then more processed snacks, we are depleting our body of things like B vitamins, which are really vital for our body. We're causing inflammation. Our cortisol levels are going up and much more. And so the impact of this, I've just alluded to some of them, and we talked about things like mood swings and stuff a moment ago, but this can be a contributing factor to digestive dysfunction, hormone dysfunction, conditions related to inflammation, so autoimmune conditions, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, and heart conditions. So the aim of this talk is, one of the aims is to try and help anyone here that is on that blood sugar roller coaster. If you don't know, start paying attention to how you feel after your meals to help you get off it, to have more of a sustained energy throughout the day, like the train that is going through the middle. So now we're going to go through different tips to get off the roller coaster. So tip 1, we want to focus on eating whole foods with plenty of healthy fats and proteins at each meal, even breakfast. So a really good starting point is to have 40% of your carbs from, 40% of your calories from carbs, 30% of your calories from fat, and 30% of your protein, 30% of your calories from protein. And so just a bit of a quick tip with fat is that 1 gram of carbohydrate from fat equals about double the calories that you would get from carbs and proteins. So it doesn't really look like 30% fat on your plate. It'll probably look like more than 15% on your plate, but still you want a good source of fat on your plate. But however, macronutrient ratios, as I talked about, are very individual. So this is a great starting point, but you need to really experiment with how you feel. So the key thing is to start tuning into your body, start moving away from the calorie counting, start thinking 2 or 3 hours after your meals, are you hungry again? Are you satisfied? And we'll talk about that in a second. So how to build a plate. So if you're having a lunch or a dinner or even a breakfast, this is how you can build a basic plate to really get used to this. So start with a base of green veggies, so steamed broccoli, baby spinach, kale, whatever you fancy. Then add in a variety of other vegetables. So as I said before, eat the rainbow, so add some other colorful non-starchy vegetables or some starchy carbohydrates or both. So really what you want to do is probably add some other non-starchy vegetables. So things like tomatoes, some capsicum, if you eat nightshades, some red cabbage, for example. You can then add, say, up to a cup of starchy vegetables, so things like sweet potato, beetroot, carrots, parsnip. And in this category, you can also add some grains, but I would probably limit your grains initially to say half a cup at each meal, because otherwise it very quickly blows out your carbohydrate consumption. Then you want to add your protein. So your hard-boiled eggs, your pasture-raised meats, your tempeh, your sustainable fish, etc. And then add your healthy fats. So fats can be used when you're cooking your veggies. So if you're stir-frying veggies, you are maybe roasting your vegetables, you can use fat in that will contribute to this. You can then add further fats in the form of a really healthy mayonnaise, for example, that's made with olive oil and egg, not canola oil, avocado, anything, olives, anything you like, or hummus, for example. And then you can then spice up your meal, adding homemade pesto, which is really easy to make, kimchi, sauerkraut, sea salt, aioli, chopped nori sheets, which is a really good source of iodine, whatever you like. But actually eating like this, people often ask me for recipes, which I'll happily give, but I often will just open the fridge and go, what do I have in the fridge? And use these principles then to build my meal based on what I have in the fridge. And I have a veggie box delivered every week. And so I never know exactly what's in the box. So actually knowing the recipes in advance is very hard, but using these principles, I can actually build my meal from scratch really easily. So breakfast ideas. This is where people struggle. So please include protein, fats, and carbohydrates in all of your breakfasts, and try and move away from your traditional, in inverted commas, view of breakfast being cereal, milk, juice, which obviously has been inspired by the cereal companies and everything else over the last however many decades. So different ideas here are eggs, any style, with bacon or smoked salmon, with sauteed spinach, kale or rocket, a chia seed bircher muesli, so you can include chia and flaxseed, shredded coconut, grated apple, coconut milk, and collagen powder. And with this, because it contains chia and flaxseed, I'd actually make it in advance to leave the chia and flax seeds at least soaking overnight. You can also, if you like oats and you tolerate oats, you can add oats to this, but having it alongside the chia and the flax seeds will help balance out the carbohydrate content of the oats. You can make frittatas with roasted vegetables and egg with salmon and or bacon. And these are great because you can make them in advance. You can make them in muffin tins, you can freeze them and then take them out the night before you want to eat them or take to work. Zucchini or sweet potato fritters. You can make cauliflower porridge, which is a favorite of mine. So this is when you basically make cauliflower rice and you basically then make porridge like you would with anything else. So you add milk, you can or coconut milk, you can add spices, you can add a tiny bit of honey, you can add some grated apple, or you can have more savory things like pan-fried mince with sauteed vegetables and avocado. You can put a poached egg in there. You can even have leftovers from last night's dinner for breakfast. And I think with this, it's about taking the stereotype away from actually what is breakfast and to start being more creative. So for this number one tip of getting off the roller coaster, my advice to you is start to pay attention to how you feel 3 or 4 hours after your meals. Are you hungry again? If so, your macronutrient percentage probably needs tweaking. So probably you want to try increasing your fats and increasing your proteins a bit more. Or are you satisfied? So your macronutrient content in this example looks good. Getting off the roller coaster tip 2. I calls this getting ahead of the slump. So whilst working on adjusting your macronutrient ratios of your meal rations, sorry, apologies, spelling mistake, if you're having energy slumps, if you are still have improved your meals that we've just talked about, and you're still getting those energy slumps, say at 3 o'clock or at 10 o'clock, what we want you to do is have a conscious snack between each meal. Because basically every time you go into that red zone, it's kind of a stressful period for your body that we basically want to get rid of. So snacking can be very supportive when done right. But first of all, check, is your hunger instead a sign of dehydration or boredom, or is it actually true hunger? So snacks should comprise a variety of healthy fats and proteins with some healthy carbs. And you want to time these before you have these energy slumps. So say you get your energy slump at 3, you want to set an alarm on your phone and go and have a snack at 2:30. So it's before your body is getting into that crisis meal. If you're having snacks, do not skip meals. You're having meals as well. And unless you have sleep issues, try and have a break, which is really supportive for your digestive system, between dinner and breakfast. So have your dinner at, say, 7 o'clock, and then have breakfast when we wake up, and we'll touch on breakfast in a second. And then as you feel your energy stabilize, what you can do is you can experiment with pulling out the snacks and go back to more eating 3 meals a day. But this is the initial circumstances for if you're having big blood sugar issues. And especially, for example, if you're a cycling female, your hormones are different every single day of the month. And so there may be periods during your cycle, especially when you get your period, where actually you want to be adding a snack in there because it's a time where you need to really nurture your body. But say around ovulation, that may change and you may not need to snack. So you do have to keep on listening to your body and seeing how you feel. Healthy snack ideas: half an avocado with balsamic vinegar or salt and pepper, vegetable sticks or sea crackers or whole fruit with guacamole, tahini, nut butter, or chicken liver pate, a full fat yogurt with berries and nuts and seeds, or you can use coconut yogurt if you don't eat dairy, and you can add in some collagen powder for a bit of protein. Chia seed puddings made with coconut milk and chia seeds, a handful of nuts and seeds, steamed veggies, salad leaves, tomato with olive oil, good quality beef jerky, hard-boiled eggs, avocado, balsamic salmon wrapped in nori. Sweet potato poppers, which is a great recipe by a company called Unbound Wellness, which have really good AIP recipes. So these are basically sweet potato and mince made in these little like chicken nugget style, like mini hamburger style, that are really great for a snack with guacamole. Stewed apple, which is really good for healing the gut, with full fat yogurt or coconut yogurt. So actions here: stock up on healthy snack options. The worst thing is being hungry and not having things in the fridge. Set an alarm on your phone for 30 minutes before the time you normally get a craving, and enjoy your snack. So tip number 3, get the day off to a great start. So to really support your blood sugar, if you are one of those people that's experiencing that roller coaster, it's really important to eat breakfast, ideally within about 30 minutes of waking. And if you are a coffee drinker or caffeine drinker, please enjoy your morning coffee with or after breakfast and not before. If you have a coffee on an empty stomach, it can really stimulate that blood sugar roller coaster in the time when in the morning our cortisol levels, which increase our blood sugar, are already high. So it just adds to that stressful experience. So please wait for your coffee until you're eating your meal or after your meal. Getting off the roller coasters, tip 4, get ample sleep. So if we don't sleep well, what happens is it decreases our insulin sensitivity. And often when we can't sleep, all we want is carbs. But unfortunately, because our insulin sensitivity has decreased, we actually really struggle to get that glucose in your body. So if you haven't got much sleep, it's actually much better. You're much better off going for protein or fat examples during that day. But focus on getting sleep and then getting to bed before 10:30 p.m. when your cortisol levels often go up, and that will really help your blood sugar. So I just thought I'd take this time, just at this point in the presentation, just to talk about intermittent fasting. So there are several iterations on how you can do this. So for example, you can do time restricted eating. So this is when you shrink the time window in which you eat each day by extending your regular overnight fast. You can have an example of a 16-8 fast, which is when you fast for 16 hours and you eat during an 8-hour window. But it can be really flexible. So a fast night can be between 12 and 20 hours in length. It can be whatever you like. So it can simply be from you eating dinner at 7 o'clock at night to, say, if you wake up at 7, to having breakfast at 7:30. And it's really good to give your digestion a rest, and lots of other reasons which we'll touch upon in a minute. But it's also really important to make sure that you're still eating nutrient-dense meals. You can do whole day fasting. So fasting for 24 hours or more, as little as twice a month, and as much as once or twice a week. You can fast and just consume water or things like bone broth. And the 5-2 diet is also an example, except you're restricting calories in this example on 2 days of the week, not strictly fasting. So benefits may include extended fasts can cause a waste removing process called autophagy. So this is when the body kind of cleans house and starts regenerating, i.e. you're getting rid of kind of dead old cells and you're replacing these with new cells. So this can be really good with anyone with inflammation. This can also support the burning of fat instead of sugar for energy, which then leads to fat loss and promotes brain function, because our brain can do very well off burning what we call ketones for brain function or fat for brain function rather than glucose. It can improve insulin sensitivity, and it can provide a kind of a eustress, which is a stressful, helpful form of stress, which then builds resilience. Pitfalls. So many scientific experiments are actually done on animals, and human trials are increasing. The problem with some human trials, for example, is that many of them may focus on men rather than women. And as I've talked about before, Women have hormones that vary every single day of the month if you're still cycling and haven't gone through menopause yet. And so those are fluctuating hormones, and even perhaps after menopause, it may be more problematic and impact our hormones more than men. And actually, many people that do fasting can end up with issues with their hormones afterwards. It can exacerbate stress if you have blood sugar issues. People also use stimulants like coffee to get through a period of fasting, which is again stressful for the body. And it takes focus on improving the underlying diet. So my recommended approach is first, change the quality of your diet and then focus on timings. 2, support blood sugar like we've just talked about. And we want to learn to burn fat first, otherwise this can put our body under tremendous stress. Then you can after that, try time restricted fasting. So as simple as I said, as having an early dinner and then having breakfast when you wake up. But always I'd recommend seeking help from a practitioner, and always listen to your body like with everything else, because everyone is different. So what works well for you may not work for your partner or your friend or vice versa. So the next topic is hydration. And hydration is really important, and I just wanted to go into it a bit more now. So hydration is extremely important for many different functions. So transporting nutrients, cellular hydration, moistening your lungs so you can transport oxygen more easily. It flushes toxins and removes waste, maintains normal electrical properties, lubricates joints, absorbs shock to joints and organs, cushions bones and joints, empowers the body's natural healing process, and enables digestion. More about this next time. You can survive 8 weeks without water, but only days. 8 weeks without food, but only days without water, which tells you something. So dehydration. The early signs of dehydration can be thirst, fatigue, dry mouth, dark urine, cravings, muscle cramps, anxiety, headaches or migraines, and degradation in memory and ability to concentrate. And these chronic signs, so long-term signs of dehydration, might be quite surprising. So heartburn, and we'll talk about heartburn next week, but water comprises hydrochloric acid. It's kind of in the name. Hydrochloric acid is stomach acid. So if you don't get enough stomach acid, this is thought to produce a lot of heartburn, and which is in a way not surprising. Joint pain, back pain, constipation, colitis, and exercise asthma are all long-term signs of dehydration. And this is because, for example, our joints actually are not very well vasculated, and so it takes a long time for our joints to become dehydrated, and then it takes a long time of consistent increased water consumption for them to become hydrated again. So it's not just drink water in one day, you'll notice improvements. It's you need to drink water consistently over months and notice improvements. So you want to have pure water and a whole food diet to get hydrated. So a whole food diet has a lot more water in it than more processed foods. Do your research on the best source of water for you. So in most circumstances, it is best to be drinking filtered water, because tap water has a whole load of contaminants in it, like chlorine, some bacteria and other things, and the filter systems used are just really not good enough. But you can get different filter systems. So if you're renting, you own a house, depending on your house, the different systems all vary. You can add lemon, lime, cucumber, berries to water to create a hydrating infusion. If drinking plain water, if that's not appetizing, and make sure you get enough electrolytes in your drinking water. So electrolytes are the minerals that are soluble in water, and these help carry electrical currents throughout our body, and they're useful for many different things. So for example, if you use a reverse osmosis water system, this takes up all minerals, so you want to be adding minerals back. If water feels like it's going, so if you feel like you're drinking water and you're going straight to the bathroom, this is often a sign that you need to support your mineral levels. And so you can drink things like coconut water, or a switchel, which is an old-fashioned drink with things like ginger in it. Add a bit of unrefined sea salt to your drink. Add something like trace mineral drops. So trace mineral drops is something you get on iHerb, but they're a combination of minerals, which make it very easy. And this can actually make your water taste better, and it can help you absorb it. So you need to have a comprehensive approach to water. So drinking water when you have a sensation of thirst, for sure. But do note, as you get older, your thirst signals decline. And if you just drink water to sequester your thirst, you probably won't counteract the dehydration. You need to drink a bit more. So you want to sip pure water throughout the day, until your urine becomes a light yellow, including a glass when you wake up, a glass when you go to bed, and then 30 minutes before each meal. So we want to avoid drinking water with our meals, but have it for your meals. And the reason for that is we don't want it to dilute our stomach juices, or our digestive juices rather. And urine, it's not an exact science, it's just using that as a guide, but it's an indicator as well as everything else here. Consider adequate intake. So there's no actually recommended amount of water, because the amount of water that we need varies so much. But the guideline adequate intake to use as a guideline whilst looking at the other things is 2.8 litres for males and 2.1 litres for females. But you also need to consider any bio-individual factors affecting water requirements. So your age, as we've already said about thirst requirements, they decline with age, so you perhaps need to drink more than you think you do. Activity levels, processed food and sugar consumption, that often decreases the water from food. Environmental conditions, so is it really hot where you are? Are you at a high altitude? Any acute or chronic diseases? Pregnancy and lactation increases your water requirements. And the consumption of caffeinated beverages may mean you want to increase your water consumption. So quickly just talking about caffeinated soft drinks, which hopefully you probably think that you've probably realized that I don't like, but these can contain phosphoric acid, which impede the production of stomach acid, can interfere with the body's ability to use calcium. They increase the blood sugar and insulin levels. They have the aspartame in there, has at least 92 different documented side effects. And then they use tap water, which often, as I talked about, contains pollutants. And then coffee. So coffee, definitely please don't have in replacement of water, have in addition. But how many coffees are you having a day? One or multiple? Are you having them in the morning, or are you having them in the afternoon and they're perhaps disrupting your sleep? Why are you having coffee? Are you using it to wake you up? Or instead, should you perhaps be having a nutrient-dense meal when you wake up to support your blood sugar with a coffee after that? How do you feel when you have a coffee? Are you ignoring the jitters that you get when you have coffee, or do you feel fine? How do you have them? Do you have it black, or do you have it with milk? If you're having it with milk, what's in the milk? Have you looked at the ingredient label of the almond milk, the coconut milk, the oat milk that you're having? Do you have low-fat milk that's more processed and has added sugar in it compared to full-fat milk? Or do you have an organic full-fat milk and you tolerate dairy? Do you add sugar or sweeteners? So I drink black coffee simply because I really struggle to find an almond milk or other milk consistently that I can actually get that's good. I also don't tolerate dairy. So maybe if I did tolerate dairy, I would have a full-fat milk, ideally organic, but I can't do that. But just have a think about it. So I just wanted to really talk quickly about different diets for autoimmune conditions, just to touch on them so that you know what, if you hear different terms, you know what these are. And these are I give an example, 4 examples. These are by no means all, and I'll give you my opinion at the end. So we have what's called a standard paleo diet. So this became popular. Well, it became popular in the UK when I was in my early 20s. So this is a standard, it's a kind of a more hunter-gatherer style diet. You focus on meat, fish, fruit, veggies, starchy tubers, nuts and seeds, and things like eggs. And you eliminate grains and dairy products, which can be very reactive to some people. We'll talk about that next week. Flour and industrial seed oils. This can be, even it may feel overwhelming for some people, but it can be a really good starting point to changing your diet. And it's often the least restrictive approach whilst having nutrient density, whilst getting the maximum results. So we then have the autoimmune protocol. And I gave a talk about this that some of you may have attended a while ago. And this has a paleo basis of what it does. It actually removes further foods that can further exacerbate the immune system, the gut, and hormone regulation. So it also takes out nuts, eggs, seeds, and nightshades. And I'll delve into quickly next week why these are also problematic or can be problematic. But there is a big focus on foods that are high in nutrients. So organ meats, shellfish, vegetables, for example, and other things like sea vegetables, so nori, wakame. And this is actually an elimination diet. So there are clinical trials completed that indicate the effectiveness of this, which is great, but it is very restrictive and it's not designed for long-term use. So as I said, it's an elimination diet. So you eliminate and add things for a certain period of time. So a minimum of 30 days and a maximum of 90 days in elimination, whilst then reintroducing things one by one to see how your body tolerates them. It's not recommended for pregnancy or nursing women, those with eating disorders, those who are underweight, or kids and teenagers. And it's often best done with a practitioner's support, especially this reintroduction phase, to really help you listen to your body and see what you react to or not. But again, it may be great for some people and may not be great for others, and you may still need to address other things other than just your diet. The WILDS protocol. So this was developed by a lady who suffered from MS, and she managed to reverse a lot of her, and slow down a lot of her symptoms. Similar to the AIP diet, except it's not as restrictive, but you have to eat 9 cups of veggies a day, 3 cups of greens, leafy greens, 3 cups of sulfur-rich veggies, 3 cups of colorful veggies. And it's really designed for those with neurological conditions, so MS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, but it can be hard to get this many vegetables in your diet. And initially, if your digestion's not up to scratch, it can cause stress on the GI tract. It doesn't exclude nightshades either, which are excluded on the AIP diet, but can be reactive to those with autoimmune conditions. And then finally, we have the ketogenic diet. And the ketogenic diet is really, you can do ketogenic versions of all of the above diets we've just talked about. And a ketogenic diet is a type of diet which causes the body to generate what's called ketones, and ketones can be used as an alternative to carbohydrate for energy, for the brain and for other things. To produce ketones, you need to have often need to have a low carbohydrate diet with a high fat diet. But it depends, different people go into ketosis at different stages. So again, this can be good for those with neurological conditions. It's also good for those with metabolic or blood sugar issues. But you can actually switch towards fat burning and burning fat for fuel without being in ketosis, which I think people don't really realize. But then ketosis may bring added benefits. It also may cause added stress. And you can also include in this diet, often because it has a lot of fat, you include dairy as a source of fat, so milk, cheese, and other things, which can be reactive for those with autoimmune conditions. So you're now going, what on earth does this mean for me? So for me, from my point of view, there is no one-size-fits-all diet. I'm not going to tell you all to go and follow one of these diets now, because you're all different. It depends on how your body is functioning and where you are in your life right now. And it depends on the root causes that are driving the condition. And going back to that tree analogy, which we talked about last week and the time before. So this is all about what are the underlying stressors that are driving your condition. And say picking rheumatoid arthritis, everyone on this call right now with rheumatoid arthritis might have different driving factors. Yes, there are common driving factors, but they may not all be the same. And also it depends on where you are in your life. The same diet in inverted commas is unlikely to serve you for the rest of your life. So my recommendation, use a whole food nutrition framework to start off with, and then adjust this for your own needs based on how you feel. So last week, I shared the foods to enjoy and foods to avoid handout. So start with this. So focus on real foods and remove processed foods. You could then perhaps start keeping a food journal, and you realize, oh, I feel rather stiff, for example, after eating tomatoes. Maybe I should have a look at taking tomatoes out for a moment, and then you can then try and bring them back in, and we can talk about elimination diets next week. And again, seek practitioners to support to help navigate your journey with nutrition, especially if you are considering embarking on one of these kind of more restrictive diets, because you want to make sure you get all of your nutrients in. It's a journey, as I said before. I shared this roadmap last week. So we want to transition to whole food diets and removing processed foods first, then identify and remove inflammatory triggers, which we'll talk about next week, and add superfoods that are nutrient dense and support your gut health. We want to upgrade the quality of your diet, which we've talked about, heal the gut and address lifestyle factors, and then heal other areas. So it doesn't all happen at once. So finally, how to make healthy eating a habit. So healthy eating doesn't have to take all day slaving in the kitchen. And there are a few quick tips that I like everyone to follow. Plan your meals in advance. So invest a small amount of time planning your meals so you can bulk shop for the week ahead. Shop for the week rather than daily. If you go to the supermarket every day, it's going to take so much more time than if you go once a week. Bulk buy pantry staples. Keep your pantry stocked with good quality oils, tinned fish, almond flour, herbs, spices, etc., etc. It makes shopping much easier. If you live anywhere near me, we have lots of bulk shops, and actually the first Monday of every month, they actually have 20% off. So we actually go every first Monday, which was the Monday that has just gone, to the bulk shop to get any of those basics like nuts, seeds, flowers that we need for that month. And we take our jars along, we even get our laundry detergent there, and we know we have it. You can bulk buy from a butcher or a fish shop. So these things freeze really well. Get a freezer in your garage if you have space and put foods in there so you're not constantly having to go to the supermarket when you need something. And investigate food delivery options. These save us so much time. We can deliver food the night before and it's delivered the next day to our doorstep, and it's organic, it's local, and it's so much better quality than going to the supermarkets. And it saves us so much time. Someone else is doing the hard yards for us. Cooking tips. So if you go to the supermarket or you get things delivered, wash your fruit and vegetables as soon as you get home, because it means it's done. And then they go in the fridge, and you just have to take them out and chop them to cook them. You can even chop them and put them in your fridge in a container, so they're already chopped and you don't need to chop them again. Batch cook. So make food 2 or 3 times a week and and then you can cook them later on, or you can put them in the freezer for a future date. My latest hack is actually using silicone loaf tins. So I'll make something like a big stew, for example, and I'll do 2 kilograms of meat at once. And once it's cool, I'll actually put it in the silicone, some of it in the silicone loaf tin, and I'll put it in the freezer. Once it's frozen, you can pop the stew out of the silicone loaf tin so it's in a block, and put it in a bag and put it in the freezer, and obviously label it. So your silicone loaf tin is then available for use for other things, and it then saves a heap of space in your freezer too. Pre-portion your food once cooked in hopefully glass Tupperware boxes, so you can actually put things like mash in muffin tins and have the same trick. Put it in the freezer, wait for it to freeze, pop it out again, and then you've got serving sizes of mash in your freezer. Use a slow or pressure cooker. These are the best things ever for batch cooking and making food taste really good without taking too much time and not very many ingredients. And then make your seasoning in advance, or buy these in advance in bulk. So dukkha, meat seasonings, curry mixes, because you can then just grab them and add them to meat as you go. So how are you going to prioritize eating and cooking well in your life? And as I said, next week, we're going to go all into digestion and talking about that. But before we get there, please go back and have a think about how you're going to bring about the change, the things that we talked about today in the presentation into your life, and how you're going to start listening to your body and really prioritizing your nutrition.